It's the MoxStars podcast, back with another banger. I'm Menace, one of your hosts, and I'm here with Flash. What is up indeed? Oh man, what a world we live in. The elephant in the room will be addressed. We will talk about the biggest change to Commander formats since we started the show? Question mark? Like, I think the last notable ban that happened was Iona, and the emergency banning of Hull Breacher. Like, that was a long time ago.
I think those happened before the podcast.
Yeah, it was like over 2 years ago.
I have never played in a Hull Breacher format.
Right. Yeah, crazy.
And I don't even know what Iona is, quite frankly.
Iona, don't keep it out of your mind. It's unfun. It's an unfun card. But anyway, this is the MoxStars podcast, the #1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. You can support the show. You can find us on YouTube, where we have 284 subscribers. Oh my God. We're going to hit that 400 mark, I think. Make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more notifications. You can also find us on all major podcasting platforms, where you can leave us a 5-star review to make us look super duper cool. I've got another cool shirt on today, so see if we can outcool that with a 5-star review. You can also support us directly via Patreon, where you can become an official Pepperhead. For $3 a month, you get an entry into each of our bi-weekly giveaways, which we will sort out at the end of this episode. And we had a little poll on the Patreon to determine what the prize would be, and it seems that the voting has concluded that today's proxied cEDH deck that will be given away is Elevir of the Wild Court. And I went through and I updated.
How hard do the bans hit these decks?
Oh, dude, they were the easiest updates in the world.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I just went through and I was just like, oh, I have an extra slot for that enchantment, or that power piece that just, got nudged out. Now I have room for it because Mana Crypt doesn't exist anymore. So the Elevir list just got, I feel like it got a little bit better. I did have to cut Jeweled Lotus too. It was a great card for the deck, but you know what? It's a card that never should have been made. But we'll talk about that in just a bit. So this week's giveaway prize will be Elevir of the Wild Court, and you can get 2 free entries into each of our giveaways by becoming a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead, like Will Rule, K Mr. K, UWP Quirt, Demon82, Tommy Cypher, Jacob Hibbard, The Boogie Ghost, Bullboy Barry, Draw for Turn. That's $5 a month. Become a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead. 2 entries. And once the throne is relinquished by the wonderful, amazing Reven Lifts, who is our Cherry Pepper Vanilla Head, who gets 10 free entries into each of our giveaways.
Gets to be besties with Don Cheadle.
Yep, besties with Don Cheadle and LeBron's fake family. A supporter of the Al-G rhythm. And a lover of Dr. Pepper. Huge ups to the Pepperhead community.
And playing that long game to get a bucket hat.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, you got, it's par 12 right now, and you are shooting 11 shots under. So take your time. I don't know if that's a good reference. Is that a bad reference?
I didn't understand the math there. Sure.
I don't know why I said that. But
well, leave it in.
Hey, that's why we're doing it. We are a one take only podcast, so no cuts here. This week it's been kind of crazy. Honestly, this past Monday we all received the news.
Yeah, the rules committee banned toasted coconut Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. It broke my heart. Shattered it. And I will never be the same.
Yeah. Was it really affecting the Dr. Pepper meta that much?
it must have just created.
In your opinion?
Well, I think it just warped things, man. It created an expectation that no other Dr. Pepper beverage could live up to. Like, I don't know how they did it, how they created it, or why they did in R&D, what they were thinking about when they created such a thing. But
the real problem is that it's a non-deterministic beverage.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't take one sip and go, yeah, that's the greatest Dr. Pepper of all time. No, you take one sip and you go, intriguing. And then you take another sip and you go, intriguing. And then you take another sip and you go, intriguing.
Yeah, it just created like an unfun environment when you're having a pepper sesh.
Yeah. And it made to achieve the limitless state of mind, it made it really hard. So it affected the game in a way that I don't think any of us were prepared for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of controversy there because they're like they banned toasted coconut Dr. Pepper, but they didn't ban the limitless pill. Like the limitless pill was right there.
No, I know, and it's like a 2-card combo, or I mean 2-pepper combo.
It's a 2-pepper combo. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it just clearly oversight by the committee to leave that off of this ban list. But enough about the Dr. Pepper meta. We all know that it's healthy and it's thriving now. But the flip side of this podcast is that we also talk about Magic the Gathering. And this week, on Monday, the Commander Rules Committee decided to make a statement. Commander banned and restricted announcement for September 23rd, 2024. Commander Dockside Extortionist is banned. Jeweled Lotus is banned. Mana Crypt is banned. Nadu Winged Wisdom is banned. These are huge, huge hits across the community. And there's a lot of feelings.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like Nadu, like, people wanted that, essentially.
Yeah, I think
the community wanted Nadu to be banned.
That was the obvious one. People were ushering it out the door. We're like, go, get going.
Dockside had been a conversation since it was printed about is this card busted? Should it be banned? But like, I think it just became so ingrained in the format that people thought it was untouchable. Mm-hmm. So that it actually happened is pretty shocking. And then for me, Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus are just total shocks. I didn't see that happening.
Me neither. And so one of the things, so this is there's a lot of content out there. Obviously, you guys have held your breath and waited for the MoxStars to come out with their opinions because our opinions are supreme. This is the show that you want to watch to generate, your foundation for opinion on this ban list, of course. But I have some pretty strong feelings. Flash, are you ready?
Yeah, for sure.
I think this is a failure on all fronts for the Commander Rules Committee. Like, this is, like you said, a shock, and it came out of nowhere for cards that seemed untouchable. And so the reason that I see it as a failure is because after they made the decision, a lot of the Rules Committee came out individually and were like, I argued against it. And so, one, it shows that there's not a lot of, there isn't a unanimous opinion. They made a decision on an opinion on making bans that people had a case to not ban. Like, God, I can't remember her name, but, a few people had louder voices than others and were just displeased with the decision that was made. And then there was the announcement that there is a tool being put in place for basically to supersede the Rule Zero conversation, right? They're trying to implement a program.
Well, before you get too deep into that, like on Rule Zero, like what I'm seeing from this conversation is that it's a figment of our imaginations. Like apparently most people do not have the Rule Zero conversation, or what the expectations of the Rule Zero conversation are totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. so for a long time, Iona was the last one, and Hullbreach were the last like bans. Since that point, the rules committee has come out and said, you know what, Rule Zero should cover a lot of this. You have the discussion at the table, figure it out, and that just in theory, great idea. In practice, horrible idea when you're showing up to play with random people. Like it
also,
just
you're
sucked.
Forcing a high social IQ aspect onto like a player base that, no offense, not necessarily people famous for their high social IQs, right?
Sure, yeah. The last time I sat down and played casual Commander, I said I was never going to do it again because there was just like someone was lurking in the shadows, basically hiding their like the power of their deck so that they could blow the table out, and then they didn't realize that they were sitting with Menace at the table who had to police them the whole time. And then they were getting mad at me, and they were creating an uncomfortable situation for me while I am focused on creating a positive social environment for the other two players. It's like,
for sure. I mean, the wretched will always seek to pub stomp. Right?
Exactly. And so it's just wild to me that, you know, here's the thing. You can't create gray area on something that you're trying to, enforce. Like a rules committee needs to just have a solid, firm statement. Like you can't just come out and say, hey, figure it out for yourself. You know how much gray area there is there to weed through? Like it's not realistic. It's not a realistic solution. And for them to try to create a tool that says, hey, we're going to create a program that's going to allow you to find like-minded people that you can play Magic with. Awesome. You know what? That's exactly how Commander was created in the first place. Kitchen table Magic. It was something that was unregulated. It wasn't a format. And now you have a company that is creating products for a format that they have a separate committee that's supposed to be outside the game, like that's enforcing and regulating these rules. Like Wizards of the Coast, you just have to take the wheel here, and you have to completely structure this like it's a format, like it's standard, like it's Pioneer, like it's Modern. Because if you leave gray area for players, you just you're creating more of a divide than you are creating unity. And now with this ban list, you've created an even greater divide amongst people, because now the casual community is sitting here thumbing their nose at competitive players saying, Dockside's gone, Jewel Lois is gone, and then flipping you the bird. And like the idea is to create a more or a healthier environment for every casual player. Like these are obviously bans that are made for like the greater casual audience, but like it basically is giving and motivating the competitive community to say, well, why don't we just go do our own thing? Which
I mean, is the timing of this, do you think, affected? Okay. So big picture behind the scenes, they say that they've been talking about this for over a year, right? That's what's come out, that like,
right.
This has been a long discussion about these cards, with the exception of Nadu, which is obviously like an emergency situation. So they've been talking about this for a long time. Do you think the timing of them being like, okay, now we're just going to do it, because this is happening like a couple weeks after that whole
thing. Right, banning of Nadu in Modern.
No, I mean the top deck situation.
Oh,
and
right.
Everything associated with that.
Yeah, the thing with this, let's see, maybe it is like with that, they're just like, all right, clearly there isn't a collective that's capable of creating a separate rules ban list, so we're just gonna we're gonna punch through. We need to make a statement. It needs to be timely. We need to do it now.
Yeah, kind of like they see that either the format's going to split in two, or this format is, the competitive community is just going to have to bite the bullet and be like, we are one format. We follow the rules committee ban list,
which needs to happen.
And this is the rules committee going, okay, if this is going to happen, let's just make this happen. Like either it's going to be two formats or it's going to be one format. Here are three cards that will help you make or break that decision, you know?
Yeah, I think I want it to be one format, and it's like just for the lack of confusion. And this is like, there's a reason that not everyone plays modern, right? Or because like the ban list or like the rule structure, what the massive pool of cards that is available to you and stuff like that, like it just doesn't jive with you. You're not into the 60 card format 1v1 type thing. There just needs to be greater regulation on Commander if we're going to, I don't know, if you're going to create, that's my big thing is this seems this is obviously very upsetting for the general, or like for the community at large, because not only is there this aspect of like, we are going to control the cards that you play, it also is affecting people's financial situation where they invest in Dockside, Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt because it makes their decks stronger. Like,
well, man, I don't know, man. If you're investing in Magic the Gathering, I have bad news. Like, we are fully in the junk wax era. Like, now's not the time to be investing in the game.
No, this like then that's another whole nother issue, which is like this. The secondary market, while the Wizards of the Coast says they don't acknowledge it, if they didn't acknowledge it, they wouldn't have got rid of MSRP, and they wouldn't be marketing the product as if it were a financial investment. Like, they have to create cards that sell products, which is based off of secondary market value. So in order for someone to go out and buy Dominaria United, like right now, the couple things that they're trying to get out of the box are to secure some sort of financial benefit, right? You're trying to get a Shieldred, you're trying to get the lands or whatever. I mean,
even more recently in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, like the whole chase card situation was based around Mana Crypt.
Yes.
A now banned card.
Yes. Yeah. And it was something like the stock price of that whole set dropped by like 30% overnight once this was announced. And
like Commander Masters, like isn't a lot of the expected value of opening a box of that out of like the collectors and other like foil textured like Jewel Lotuses, right?
Well, I mean, here's the big thing with the timing of this ban is that the Festival in a Box was a huge marketing campaign by Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and a big part of that was Commander Masters having 2 collector's boosters in that. And so there were people who were finally receiving their Festival in a Boxes at home just as this ban list is being announced, opening their packs, being super excited. I saw someone pull a textured foil Jeweled Lotus the day that the ban list came down, and they were obviously, they had to be the most disappointed person in the world. Yes, the card still technically costs $300. There's no one in the world who's going to buy that.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, right now, buy the cards if you have the disposable income and stuff like that, or if you just like opening packs, or if you're drafting, or you're a collector or whatever. But like, if you're just playing the game, proxy.
Yes.
Like, now's the time to proxy, right?
This is a banner statement this is a banner statement announcement that supports the use of proxies. The collective, like let's say you're playing Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, and Mana Crypt in your decks. Like let's say you wanted to build a deck, a real deck, and you wanted those 3 cards in it before the announcement. That's a minimum at their lowest values possible. You're spending almost $400, probably closer or more than $400 after taxes, depending on where you live. So like to be able to say that, oh wow, we just, like $400 just disappears. There's some places out there that are offering like returns, but this is just a huge kick in the nuts to anybody who is like, I'm going to make my decks better. I'm a growing player, and so I've traded in half my collection to go get a Mana Crypt. Like, punished. Like, even if you're, like trading in cards that you were just collecting over time by playing the game as like a, going to pre-releases every now and again or whatever, punished. So we could spin our wheels on this all day. And
I personally think it's a good thing, but we should move on.
Right. Well, we should continue a little bit further because, like, you're right. It is a good thing for the structure of the game, right? Like, it is just the mismanagement of this particular instance that is the bad side of it. That they need. But hold on, the mismanagement isn't the rules committee. The mismanagement is Wizards, the corporation, knowing that this discussion was going on and then, still printing 2 cards that they knew were probably going to eat a ban. 3 cards even, because Dockside's got in reprints within that time frame. Yeah.
Reprinting 3 cards that they knew were going to get a ban as chase cards.
Right.
That's bad faith on their part.
Yeah, so the announcement comes too little too late, because it's just, these are cards that if you wanted them banned, the argument for them being banned could stretch back to the beginning of the format, or since these cards were created, right? You don't want to create these advantages, or whatever for players. It's something that Jeweled Lotus comes out, card that never should have been made, to sell. It's made to sell packs, and I'm sure Wizards of the Coast is out there being like, hey, rules committee, we love you guys. Here, I don't know, some way to line their pockets and say, do not ban Jeweled Lotus, please. It's going to help us push packs. Hey, hold off on that Mana Crypt announcement because, hey, we're releasing Lost Caverns of Ixalan and it's got these sweet things that are going to sell packs. It's the whole reason for Double Masters, Double Masters 2 or whatever, 2022, Dockside Extortionist was probably the driving force behind a lot of that and Imperial Seal. So this is all in the grand scheme of things, a for-profit corporation that does not have your best interests in mind. That being said, the positives from this announcement are that the format is going to change massively. There are the advantage that, let's say, Sisay had before, where it's just a Jeweled Lotus away, is gone. A Mana Crypt land.
Yeah, I think it's just cool that a lot of games, they go through Thoracle, or they go through Dockside loops, or they go through Food Chain loops, which are basically Dockside loops a lot of the time. That's a lot of the way, decks are built. Mm-hmm. And now that if that's not available, cool. It makes a more interesting meta. In the short term, I think people are going to flock to decks that weren't affected by the ban, but it opens it up to more possibilities. And also getting rid of Lotus and Mana Crypt means that now there's no longer the possibility that you just RNG lose a game,
Yeah, you're right, because now 4 mana commanders don't come down on turn 1. It's gonna be way harder to get that, for that to happen. So decks that are gonna thrive.
It just makes it more skill based and less luck based.
Yeah, and it switches the axis on which all of these decks that are already have cemented themselves in cEDH, all of them have to pivot on a different axis, because if you're going, let's say Obnixilis, right, Captive Kingpin, 4 mana, you were mulliganing usually for a way to get Obnix out super early. So now it has to switch to a mid-range engine that hopefully, when you get there, you're set up, your board state is set up. Now, we no longer have to pass cards through the Dockside test. Through that that test strip of being hey, is it valuable enough to have on the battlefield to be punished by Dockside? That isn't a thing anymore, which is awesome. So strategies that develop board states over time are in a better situation than they were prior. Teom, Luminous Enigma, is a deck that gets better with this ban. I would say that even my Shalai and Alar was not using any of these cards. And so instantly, way better. Like Elevere gets way better. The ability to win through combat becomes more likely. That like these are the awesome parts of this ban. And so like Dockside Loops just reigned supreme. It was the most powerful card in all of Commander. It's now gone. Jeweled Lotus was probably number 2. That's gone. Mana Crypt probably in the top 10. That's gone. It's like it's crazy to shake things up so much and so close, like you said, to the events of the whole Zane top deck situation. Like now, I guess the community knows where to look, right? They can say, okay, new ban list is up. Let's change. Let's switch it up. The meta is going to. A lot of people are excited about it. All the content creators out there that I've listened to are like, yeah, this does suck, but hey, change is change, and I'm excited to see what comes out on the other side of it. So I will take a similar stance, but I do think that moving forward, there has to be a stronger presence from the Commander Rules Committee. Otherwise, this format will continue to fall into disarray. That's where I sit.
Hey, you're listening to the MoxStars podcast. It's probably been a solid 15, 20 minutes since we said that.
The number 1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. All right. Today's episode is not meant to be a vent sesh on the ban announcement. Today, we are talking about a beginner's guide to lands. This was suggested to us by Nat on the Discord server that if you're getting into the game, what kind of lands, should you be playing? Depending on format, how do you approach valuing lands? So today, that's what we wanted to talk about. And so I'm not really sure where to get started. Flash, you and I were talking before the show about tier lists on certain lands as they relate to Commander and Eternal formats, and but there are a lot of other formats in Magic. So before we get into our tier list for cards that should be played in Commander, we should mention that in Standard, there are always new cards coming. That is Wizards of the Coast thing right now, is that they're not really reprinting cards. They're creating new lands, new rare cycles of lands that have new effects. And so it's really hard to create a timeless episode that people can come back to after a couple months when, the whole, any advice we might give on Standard would completely shift upside down. So what I would say right now for Standard, if there are lands that are not basic, that have land typings, that they are likely more playable than basic lands, depending on your strategy. If you're playing mono red like a heathen, then just play basics. Just play basic mountains. And there's very little need for, I would say, non-basic lands. There's things like Demolition Field out there right now that are a very positive, very great for monocolored decks to be able to stifle and slow down multicolored decks. So you have those options. In Standard, if there are man lands, which if you're unfamiliar with the terminology, man lands are lands that turn into creatures by activating an ability. Those are always worth running if you're playing mid-range or long, going for the long game. If you're playing turbo, it's not worth it. You're not going to have time. And it's not worth your mana. But I guess right now, this episode is being recorded around the release of Duskmourn, and there's this new cycle of lands called the Verge lands that have a tap for a color, like Flood Farm Verge is tap for a white, and then it says you can tap it for a blue, but you can only activate that if you control a plains or an island. So the Surveil lands become way better when you can play a Surveil land, get card advantage, get more information, and then play one of these on turn 2 and have access to both colors of land or both colors of mana. So like there are things like that you have to consider as, things come in and rotate out. So while standard is the rotating format, it's hard to like give a definite, this is the S tier, this is the A tier, this is the B tier. So I hope that advice is helpful for anybody who is in standard, who is looking for a little guidance. If you're in low colors, basics do the job. Even if you're in 4 colors, basics with how many like things like God, what's that card from Wilds of Eldraine? I can't even think of it. It's a fetch land, but for basics.
Fabled Passage.
Fabled Passage. Thank you so much. Like even in 4 color decks, Fabled Passage is still relevant because it fixes your colors, and especially in the mid game. So I like I said, I hope that's helpful. As we go down Pioneer, the scope is so much larger because it's not a rotating format. Anything coming in just gets added right to Pioneer. Right now in Pioneer, shock lands are legal, fetch lands are not, and so are surveil lands. So a lot of the time, so are triomes in Pioneer. So a lot of the time, really depends on your strategy. And Pioneer is still like an unproven battleground. There's always new cards coming in and changing the format and the meta. So it's really an uncertain, unstable sort of environment right now in a good way. It promotes a lot of creativity, so you can play lands and test different things out. Fast mana, or like, I shouldn't say fast mana, fast lands that say they enter the battlefield untapped if you have 2 or less lands are very valuable. And then also you can call them slow lands, are if you have 2 or more lands, they come in untapped. Those are also valuable depending on, the pace of play that you want to take. So you also have man lands in Pioneer with Den of the Bugbear and was it Cave of the Beholder or whatever from Adventures in the Forgotten Realm. As you roll down to Modern, you have access to fetches, shocks, and pretty much every valuable land outside of duels. So it's fetches and shocks pretty much the whole way. All right. Eternal formats. Commander. Flash. Whew. This is where we get into it. We had a pretty in-depth discussion where we named probably 50 lands, maybe more. And it tried to put them into tiers that made sense and into like and to promote discussion. And if we miss anything, please comment on the YouTube video, join our Discord server and join the conversation. Let us know what we might have missed, what you value more than we do. If we miscategorized a land, if you think a B tier land is an A tier land, or if an A tier land is a C tier land, get on there. Let us know. We're amenable to criticism. We love it. It's how we get better at everything. But let's get started. Right away, in the S tier, I think we just have to go ahead and mention dual lands. There are 10 of them. They are on the reserve list, so they are, they're expensive, but they provide color fixing with no downside. They always come in untapped unless a card or effect says otherwise. And they're just the most playable land in Eternal formats.
They are auto includes unless you're literally in one color.
Yes. Yeah, that's the big thing. They're auto includes unless you're in monocolor nonsense. So things like Savannah, Taiga, Tropical Island. Yeah.
Underground Sea. Luminaries such as Tundra.
Yes. And when you have one in your hands, man, like a real one, it just feels different. Like you're holding a relic. Like they're so awesome. I hate that they're on the reserve list but it does create value. I love them. All right. Those are the auto includes along with fetch lands. I think also are auto includes. If you're unfamiliar with fetch lands, they are lands that have the ability to tap, pay 1 life, and then you can search your library for a land with one of 2 particular typings. So with
the interesting or not interesting, but something to note here, you might include fetch lands that don't include one of your typings. Like you might play Wooded Foothills even though you're in, green and black.
Yes.
Just to have that additional fetch a forest, which can then fetch you, if you're in green and black, a bayou.
Yeah, that's huge. That's great note, because these fetch lands don't have color identity. Lands themselves don't have color identity except for when they tap for a particular color. So note that these fetch lands, like Bloodstained Mire here on the screen, don't tap for any particular color, and so their identity is colorless. You can run them in any deck, full stop. So you can even crack it in a mono green deck and search for nothing. But they're great. They are also auto includes. They fix your color. Like you can go grab a Triome with this. You can grab with, like, let's say Wooded Foothills, like Flash is talking about. You can grab something like a Dryad Arbor, because Dryad Arbor has land typing. It is a forest, so it allows you to go grab that, and now you have a creature on the battlefield. So
the Surveil land cycle is also good because they have typing.
Yeah, I don't. For whatever reason, I still haven't memorized any of their names, but yes, they also have land typing, and it provides you card advantage. So fetch lands over time get better and better and better. And right now, they're as cheap as they're ever going to get. They're less than $10 a piece. So, which is crazy. That's insane to me. When I first got into Magic, it was $40 to get a fetch land.
I think since that time, they've reprinted them at including Secret Layers, including Unfinity, 7 or 8 times, right?
Yeah. Well, Modern Horizons sets have been a huge platform for them.
Yep.
And maybe the Masters sets, we've gotten to see a few more. But yeah, they've been doing a great job at like reprinting fetch lands. It's like they don't. Here's the thing about fetch lands and dual lands, that a lot of players in the casual community will sneer at them or frown upon them. While they are part of the most powerful decks in Commander, they don't actually increase the power of a deck, if that makes sense, right? Like, there's no...
I mean, they increase the consistency of your mana base.
Yes, that is exactly what they do. But by going to grab a dual land, you are not creating an advantage over your opponent that you would have, like maybe a 2-life advantage over using something like a shock land. But it's nothing that has proven statistically to warp like gameplay at all. Like that player who's playing the dual land doesn't have a greater chance to win than you do if you're not playing them. So they just create consistency in fixing colors, which does provide its own advantage, but statistically there hasn't been anything that's come out to say that a dual land performs better than a shock land or a surveil land in end results. So
hey, can I add one thing to the talking about fetches?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just want to shuffle your deck.
That's also true.
And yeah, you don't talk about it a lot, but one of the rules of Magic is that you can't shuffle your deck whenever you want. And if you have some effect where you know what cards are coming in your deck and it's garbage, you need to get past them, or for some other reason, shuffling your deck, having the option to do that, can come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. There's things like Bolas's Citadel that like to look at the top card of the library, and if you just play a fetch and then roll a few spells off the top until you hit a land, like, and you can't go any further, like by not cracking that fetch right away, you're now shuffling to give yourself a chance to like keep the ball rolling. and certain things like, Sylvan Library, hate to say it, hate to mention the card, but you pick up 3 cards that you just don't like, and so you put 2 of them back. That fetch land, sometimes there have been times where I pick up the 3, I hate them all, I take the fetch land out of them because I put it back, and then I can shuffle. That way the next time it comes back around, I get to look at 3 different cards. Those 2 that are, dog shit essentially sitting at the top, I can shuffle them in and give myself a new roll of dice. So yes, the value in shuffling is greater than you might imagine. As like, if you're getting into Magic, shuffling your library, having the ability to is, sometimes the difference in the game. So fetch lands definitely have that upside. The next set of lands that we have in our S tier are Gaia's Cradle, which is this is the best. For me, in my opinion, this is the best land ever made, ever print. Well, outside of Tolarian Academy, but that's banned. So no playing Tolarian Academy. This is the best land that exists.
Yeah, Gaia's Cradle, there's decks. I think we looked at a deck last week that played, I think, 4 cards that all were in the deck to fetch Gaia's Cradle. Number 1 on the list, Crop Rotation.
Yep, which special shout out to Crop Rotation. If you're in green playing a creature shell that, has Gaia's Cradle in it, like, you should be playing Crop Rotation as well, because it brings the land in untapped. So you can spend 1 green mana, get rid of that dud of a land, go get Gaia's Cradle, tap for 4, 5, 6 mana. It's like a crazy ritual. So
yeah. I mean, Gaia's Cradle is a super OP card. Like, Gaia's Cradle plus being able to untap it multiple times a turn is a great way to get infinite mana, especially if you don't have Dockside anymore.
Yeah, I think that Gaia's Cradle takes a huge step forward in regards to the ban list that just happened. Like, we saw the value settle around $800 for, the last couple of years. I think that now that Dockside's gone, Gaia's Cradle will see, like, this and Sarah's Sanctum, which also falls into our S tier, is our
Sarah's Sanctum, I think, is going to get a huge bump from this, because part of, because people will play more enchantments, right?
Yeah, we used to have
not worried about feeding Dockside.
Yeah, our litmus test with Dockside is no longer relevant. So, like, enchantments can sit, and I think this is another great thing about the banning of Dockside, is that now we're going to see more widespread enchantment and artifact removal in the format, because cards like Sarah's Sanctum will seek to abuse, like, a massive board state of enchantments that I will definitely be taking advantage of. So it's like this.
Nia guy gonna do.
Nia guy gonna do. And Nia guy gonna play both these lands, because Sarah's Sanctum and Gaia's Cradle.
You're listening to the MoxStars podcast, by the way.
Yes, you are. These 2 cards are just, they're broken. And I think that if they're going to ban Mana Crypt, they're going to ban Jeweled Lotus, they're going to ban Dockside, these also should have been banned. And
I disagree. They require significant investment in a board state that can be disrupted, whereas Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt and Dockside can pretty much generate profit from nothing.
Well, Dockside, on the other hand, does require a bit of a setup, but
not from you. Like,
no.
It's just it doesn't. I'm saying it doesn't require setup in the sense that, like, the way the game naturally develops, like, there's going to be 5 artifacts and enchantments on the board.
In no time.
1 turn cycle.
Yeah, in no time.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree there. The I guess what I mean by that you could justify these bannings is that they come from Gaia's Cradle 1 doesn't require a huge setup. It can be disrupted, which you're absolutely right. And then Sarah's Sanctum.
Well, I mean, the way you're going to get there in green is with Mana Dorks, and Mana Dorks are not in a great place right now.
Right, because Bowmasters exists. Maybe you're right. I
think these cards are safe. I think they're safe.
Yeah, I am amenable to feedback and criticism. So, I'm allowed to change my opinion.
If I'm wrong and these cards are wildly OP and warping the format and are going to eat a ban, let us know.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, we'll see how things shake out.
Say it to my face.
Hey, man, we're in a format of shifting sands right now. Nobody knows what's certain. So these are two cards.
We're in a format of shifting woodlands right now.
Woo!
Which we'll talk about later.
Yes. And
not an S tier card yet.
Right. Not too long from now, we'll be talking about it. So to continue the S tier conversation, we have the 5 color lands that meet this requirement. One being Command Tower.
I don't think there's a situation where you don't play Command Tower.
Every
City
deck.
of Brass.
Yeah.
Mana Confluence. Gemstone Caverns.
Yes. And Gemstone sits above all of them in our ranking just slightly, while it can't go to S+. It's like...
Yeah.
It's an auto include into every deck regardless, because of just the upside of starting the game with you'd be surprised how much 1 mana makes a difference. But getting that boost at the start, it's almost like having a mana crypt. And Gemstone Caverns gives you an advantage that, you have to be very lucky to have or to get. But it does... provide you with the ability to make plays on turn 1 that you would otherwise be making on turn 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes to Gemstone Caverns being another one. Let's see. I think Exotic Orchard has been seeing, I don't think it's S tier, I think it's A tier. But yeah, requires a little bit of setup. Tarnished
Exotic Orchard, Forbidden Orchard, like they're a lower tier 5 color.
Right.
Land.
Yes. Yeah. But definitely Mana Confluence, City of Brass, and the like at Command Tower, Gemstone Caverns. And as we go down, I think there's 2 colorless lands that make the cut, and it's Ancient Tomb and City of Traders.
Yeah, for me, those might even be...
They're fringe. They're right on the edge for me.
Yeah, S-, A+.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like
right
maybe
there.
we do need to get granular if we maybe we'll get a PDF chart or something, and we'll get really granular about this. But I think those cards are on the verge.
Yep. They're enough to put you ahead. It does require your land drop to be able to put them down. City of Traders, if you're unfamiliar, has a significant downside. When you play another land, sacrifice City of Traders. So oftentimes it comes down untapped. You tap it, you get 2 mana to your pool. The following turn, you play another land if you have one. This is a card that sees a lot of play in turbo shells that run maybe 24 or 25 lands. And so when you see...
You know what? I would say City of Traders is for sure A tier.
Yeah, I think I would say...
And call Ancient Tomb like S- tier.
Yeah, it'd be high A tier, and then Ancient Tomb being low S tier. But yeah, the trigger goes on the stack for City of Traders, and you tap it for 2 more mana, sacrifice it, and now you have access to your other land. So there is like utility and purpose. The last bit of our S tier, and these cards are relatively recent within the last 2 years, but Otawara and Boseiju crack the S tier.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in these colors, absolutely no reason not to run these. They get through all the stacks effects. Really, like they're just pure upside cards. They come in untapped.
Yep. The benefit of Channel is proving to be greater than anticipated. Like the ability to get through a Grand Abolisher, to get through Silence, to be able to sit on something like this, and the fact that they also can cost less for just controlling legendary creatures, which there are thousands of now. So it's like, and
you're presumably going to have at least one on your board.
Exactly. You always have access to one, if not 2. So like they become better just by like we talked about Rograk and Thrasios last episode. Like these cards, oftentimes, like, don't like that noise. These, like, we talked about Rograk and Thrasios last week. These cards oftentimes cost way less when you have commanders that cost 0 and 2, because they're on the battlefield probably, 90% of the time. So Otawara becomes a 2-mana return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Like, it's insane. And then Boseiju, on the other hand, is just pure removal, where, it costs 1 green mana a lot of the time just to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land. So this is Gaia's Cradle removal. This is Sarah Sanctum removal that allows the opponent to search a land with a basic land type and put it onto the battlefield untapped so they can go get a dual land or whatever. But the trade is worth it, like, every single time. So
yeah, I think time will tell on this too. I don't think this is an S tier card, but I think Talon Gates of Madara does something very similar to Channel.
Yes.
With its ability, and it's probably going to end up being like an A tier card, where it's high consideration for one of your utility slots.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's seeing play in way, 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 way more lists. So the Talon Gates of Madara, I think, comes in at the top of our A tier list. So let's move on to that. We got this right here. If you're unfamiliar, when it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature phases out. So this allows you to lift the gates on things like Drannith Magistrate, or other things, or help your board dodge things as well. So you can use it on your commander, but it also has an ability that says you can pay 4 mana to put it onto the battlefield from your hand. So like Flash was saying, it has a channel-like ability. And then it also allows you to fix your color. So like it's a filter land, right? So you can use it with greater utility. It can go into 5 color shells with not having much downside, because it can help you get the fixing you need and help go where you need to go. So as you can see here, the value of it reflected on Scryfall is about $11. So this is clearly a land that is seeing play and will continue to see play, and if not, see more play than we're seeing now. So I'm excited to see where it goes. It was, when it first came out, Flash, I think you were the most vocal about it, that you really liked this one.
I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, take it. Take a lap. Next on our A tier list, we have Shocklands. So we just had a question on the Discord server about Shocklands being viable in cEDH. And while I don't think you need every single viable color, like you have your duels, and then I think these help fill the gaps for what you might like. If a majority of the pips in your deck are like, let's say right now I have up on the screen Steam Vents. If your majority of your pips are blue and red, like, and you're playing a Grixis Shell and you don't have a whole lot of black going on, like, you're going to pick this over something like Watery Grave, where, this helps you hit more of your things. It helps you be more consistent. And once you've gone through your dual lands in order to fix colors, you have these backup options that come in untapped for
and
a very
the 2
low
life
price.
is nothing. They are essentially dual lands.
Right. In constructed formats where you start with 20 life, it says, hey, you got to give up 10% of your life in order for this to come in untapped. So the cost is much higher. This is like, you're like, hey, here's 5% of my life. I don't care. Take it.
Yeah. 5% in a format where life really doesn't matter. It's not going to be the determining factor in how you win or lose the game.
Right. And
most of the time,
I think what a lot of people look at when they look at top tier decks right now is that a lot of them probably aren't playing too many shocks because they aren't using their fetches for them. They're likely on ad naus. So like that's when the life becomes a valuable resource. So this is where you can see them being like sort of scrunched out, where the next tier of our survey or of our list is the next card we're going to mention are the Surveil lands. And our opinions have changed pretty dramatically on the Surveil lands as time has gone on. God, I wish I knew any of the names of them, but so the Surveil lands have the ability to come in. They have land typing. So just like Steam Vents, there is one that is an island mountain that enters tapped, but when it enters, you surveil one. So it gives you the ability to have card advantage. And so you get to see more information. You have the potential to fill the grave, and where, the graveyard is essentially your second hand, right? You still have access to those things throughout the course of the game. These cards have proven to be potential one-ofs, like in cEDH. In Commander, I think that you can play multiple, like in lower, like high power, mid power, or whatever. You can play multiples of these, and they're not hurting you. What they are is providing card advantage.
Yeah, I feel like land typing so that you can search for them plus surveil with the card filtering it's just good enough, man. Like, it's worth considering 1-2 slots. I think they are still. I would still rather have the shock lands, I think, for me. So maybe they're like half a tier below, in my opinion. But definitely A tier considerations for your deck.
Yeah, and the reason that I think I personally also roll with shock lands is due to consistency. You never know what you're going to pull off the top of the deck. And if you're relying on your land drop and you run into a tapped land, it is painful. It is like, regardless of what that card advantage gives you by it entering and giving you the option to see, it doesn't matter, because all of your expectation of your plan moving forward was based off what's in your hand. And so if you needed that untapped land to make the next play and to take the next step forward in your plan, that tapped land that you just picked up just set you back an entire turn, which is the difference. Like it. I'm sorry.
Mean, like, especially too, like you want to make your land drops, right? Especially early in the game, and not having the option for it to come in untapped can just be a huge bummer.
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst play in the world anymore to take a land, or to like play a fetch, go surveil, and pass and go around the table and come back to you. So there are certain decks that are going to take advantage of that. Like Roxai is still going to try and win on turn 1 every single time. They're not going to play a surveil land at all. But the next set of lands to bring up are the bond lands. They come from Battle Bond. They're reprinted in Baldur's Gate, but the cards like Luxury Suite that say they enter the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. These don't have land typings, but name a format where you're going to have less than 2 opponents, constructed. It's always Commander. These are Commander cards designed for Commander or Two-Headed Giant. And like, these are always coming in untapped. Like, pretty much always.
Yeah, and for me, the only reason not to play them is that, like, you've already filled up your slots.
Yeah.
Like, if you're in 2 colors, I think it's an auto include. 3 colors, you're probably there. You've probably already filled up your mana base.
Yeah. It's like, 3 colors, the mana base is usually already filled. You might have room for 1 or 2, but then you're starting to take slots that utility lands would otherwise take. So you could mix it up with shock lands, this or shock lands. But again, you're not able to tutor them with the fetches. So
yeah, and they're not even a budget consideration anymore, like with the price drop of shocks.
Right. Yeah, they're one and the same. They're similar investment. So next we have Phyrexian Tower, which is exclusive to black, but it offers upside that you wouldn't normally see. It's a mythic from Modern Horizons 3. It's been in in a Secret Lair drop. It's been in Ultimate Masters. It's been expensive for a long time. It was in Jumpstart, but it is tap, add a colorless, or tap, sacrifice a creature, add 2 black mana. It's a legendary land, so you can't copy it, but the upside of being able to sacrifice a meaningless creature to have the value of 2 lands versus 1 is enough to make the cut into A tier. Plus,
yeah, and there's no downside on it.
Right. Sacrifice outlets are, like that are good enough to make the cut are few and far between. So like the fact that this is a land, it sits there, it generates advantage, it comes in untapped, and then on top of that can be the sacrifice outlet for something like Dargo that helps take you to the next level. Like that's so valuable. Like there's like tons of things that just need to be, that little sacrifice is enough to push it over the edge to like get the wheel turning to win the game even. So I really like Phyrexian Tower. I wasn't a believer until I was playing Hepatra and the snakes became, I started seeing them like they were 2 black mana instead of 1/1 death touch.
I mean, and this is something that can be true about a lot of cards. Like a card doesn't have to be amazing to be very good. It can be the combination of a couple good things and no downside. Like
right.
That can make something amazing.
Yeah. I think that's the best thing to say about a lot of these like cards that make the cut. When we're looking at S tier, right, we're looking at like things that have little to no downside at all. And so they become auto inclusions into your decks. Like when we look at A tier, we're looking at cards that have either massive upside or, with a very little downside, or they're just very good with no downside. So like for Phyrexian Tower, there's no downside, but it has the potential to, because it's limited to being into decks that like it has to fit a specific strategy. Right? But the upside is so huge.
But if you're in that strategy, it's great.
It's great. Yep. The next card, Cavern of Souls, the land that is chase worthy. Now that creature shells are going to be huge, I think we're going to see more kindred strategies arise in cEDH now that like you don't just have very generic things that loop with Dockside and go crazy. But Cavern of Souls enters the battlefield. You choose a creature type. You can add a colorless or add 1 mana of any color. Spend it only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that spell can't be countered. Unreal. Yep. It's incredibly powerful.
It's no downside with 1 huge upside.
Yep. Yeah, enters the battlefield untapped. It doesn't have land typing, but that's totally fine because having the upside of having your spells be uncounterable, as we see now that this card is legal in standard, has, certain decks competing that shouldn't be. So, like, Cavern of Souls, huge.
Think big, too. Name human. Name wizard. Sometimes look at your creatures in your deck. They might have 2 or more typings.
Yeah, look at the subtyping, right? So, like, now that, and the typings keep growing while there are things like human, like you said, will just keep, like, the pool of humans just keeps growing. And so, like, this and
one day
Winota,
you may name Viashino and it just wins you the game.
Yeah.
It might happen.
And there's really weird things like Kogla and Yudaro, which is a mutant dinosaur turtle like thing that, like all these creature typings are so out of hand when you put 2 legendary creatures on 1 card. So you'd be surprised at what you can encompass just by naming, like you said, wizard even. So it's really has a wide scope, even though it seems like it's very narrow. It's wider than you might think. The last card in our A tier, and this one might be a little controversial for the competitive players out there, but Urza's Saga makes the cut. Now that Mana Crypt is gone, I do think that this sees more play, or now that Dockside is gone as well, it doesn't contribute to Dockside count. It's Urza Saga from Modern Horizons 2. it's a saga that when it enters, you put a counter on it, and it says Urza Saga gains tap at a colorless. So right away, you can tap it for mana. It has, as its second tier on the saga, Urza Saga gains pay 2, tap it, create a 0/0 colorless construct that has this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So 1/1 for 2 mana. Good deal. Huge upside. And then the third is search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. We're going to see more utilities or like more utility artifacts in 0 and 1 now that those like primary targets are gone. Soul Ring becomes a really great target for this. And like it, you know,
I mean, Shadow Spear,
Sensei's Divining Top. We have Vexing Bauble now is a potential target for it. So I think this, even though it requires 3 turns to be able to get through like these like every step of the saga, it only gets better as the turns go on. So in a mid-range
it's
mindset,
all upside, no downside.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the downside would be that it's not moving fast enough for your particular strategy, which would be you're turboing out of control. That's in which case this has no place for your deck. Like you're going to see card advantage in different ways. This allows you
Lotus Petal is searchable with this. Sometimes a combo piece.
Yeah, exactly. We've been talking about in the last 2 episodes how Lotus Petal is just becoming this Eternal Witness, you know, Displacer Kitten combo, or like those 3 pieces together. So, yeah, that's why Urza Saga makes the cut. It's really great. And it's only getting better with time. As we move to the B tier and the C tier, there are less cards that we're going to talk about as we get nearer to the end of the episode here. But in this particular section of the show, if you feel that we missed something, this is the time to like rewind and come back and let us know what we missed. But B tier, we have the new Modern Horizons 3 cards that are basically bolt lands on the back, like Sink into Stupor. This is 1 and 2 blue. It's an instant that says return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. And on the back side, you can have it enter untapped if you pay 3 life. And it's a blue mana. Like it'll taps for a blue mana, non-basic land. So the reason for Sink into Stupor, for Witch Enchanter, for Fel the Profane, they make it into our B tier is they're seeing more play than I ever thought they would. But if you're not on Ad Nauseam, they're incredibly valuable. That 3 life, like we said, it's just 1 more than a shock land, and it has the massive upside of also being a spell that you can use later in the game. So, especially Sink into Stupor, which is like, yeah, you're not countering it. So things like Cavernous Souls don't really, like this doesn't even blink at Cavernous Souls. And then it also allows you to return a non-land permanent. So it stops certain things like Underworld Breach. If you're on the very thin mana margin and you try to go for Underworld Breach, Sink into Stupor can really upset your plans. So,
yeah, I think Sink into Stupor is the most like legitimately good of this cycle of bolt lands.
Yeah, if you're and then there's also like I said, Witch Enchanter, which enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. It doesn't have flash, which I wish it did. But you know, it still has value beyond that. It's a human as well, so things like Winota are gonna love something like Witch Enchanter. And then Fel the Profane is the black version of this, which is 2 and 2 black, destroy target creature or planeswalker, and then on the backside it taps for a black mana. So they're all great. These are huge upgrades to concepts that were initially introduced in Zendikar Rising. But at the mythic tier,
I think Entreat the Angels and Agadeem's Awakening and Turntimble Symbiosis and Shatterskull Smashing and Seagate Restoration are all very good cards.
Yes.
I might even put them like C tier.
Right. They are just the mana. They're so mana intensive. Like the ceiling is.
They're just unbalanced.
Yes, the ceiling is really high, right? For casual commander, those cards are lovely, right? And Aghanim's Awakening to end the game. You bring a bunch of creatures back. Awesome. Sweet. It's turn 11. The game should end, But like these fit a very particular niche where it's like, no, this is the mid game. We're still here. It's turn 3, turn 4. And I need to be able to interact with the table in a meaningful way. These cards allow you to be able to do that. And even though they are not technically lands on the front, they are still lands on the back. So,
yeah. And I just want to say, like, this cycle from Modern Horizons 3, I think the spell side, all worse than the original Zendikar cycle. But it's just like that costing. It just makes them more relevant.
Right. Absolutely. Next, on our in our B tier, we have Minamo, School at Water's Edge, an original print from Kamigawa. Also got reprinted in the Lord of the Rings Commander series. But this is a legendary land that taps for a blue mana, so no downside. It just comes in, taps for a blue. But then the upside is huge because you can pay a blue, tap it, untap target legendary permanent. Now, what would I want to untap? That's legendary, that makes a huge impact on the competitive format at the moment. It's the One Ring. This has seen more and more inclusion into lists because it helps instigate more card draw in certain things like the One Ring. This also...
Hey, does it untap a Gaia's Cradle or a Sarah's Sanctum?
Absolutely does. This is, yeah... It has like utility beyond it. Before the One Ring was printed, this would never make the cut. But since we're literally looking at, and not only does it just untap, it untaps any legendary permanent on the battlefield. So you can also, politically instigate some shenanigans by untapping someone else's One Ring if they have available mana to be able to stop someone from winning the game. So
yeah, I mean, this is no downside, all upside. It's just that it's specific circumstances.
Yeah, very upside. Circumstantial. So, B tier lands, I think that also make the cut now. Even though we talked, I think Forbidden Orchard and Tarnished Citadel fall down to the top of this tier, just because giving your opponent a creature with Forbidden Orchard is a pretty big downside. And then, unless I'm particularly running it in Shalyn Halar, because I've won the game off of a Authority of the Consuls and a Heliod. Give them a creature, it comes in tapped, but I gain a life, and Heliod's on the battlefield, so I get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. And then I activate Heliod, giving Shalyn Halar lifelink, and then I win the game. Like, I've done that one time, and now it is justified. So I think that it falls to the top of my B tier. But then we also have things like Spire of Industry, and we have
that's a 5-color land, and Glimmer Void. Both probably gonna function as 5-color lands. But only in specific decks.
Right. These are very like we were talking earlier with the ability to disrupt Gaia's Cradle and Sarah's Sanctum. These are also like very easily disrupted. So like that's why they fall down. They're not as valuable. And like where you can play cards like Mana Confluence that say tap, pay 1 life, add 1 of any color. Spire of Industry requires you to have an artifact on the battlefield to be able to do that, where you could just be playing Mana Confluence and you'd be just fine. And then Glimmer Void has, if you at the beginning of the end step, if you control no artifacts, sacrifice Glimmer Void, but tap, add 1 mana of any color. So it has the ability to come in, tap for 1 of any color, but then if you're not in possession of an artifact by the end of the end step, goodbye land. So there's risk involved with Glimmer Void and Spire of Industry.
Basically, these two lands, if you're in 3 to 5 colors and you have like 22 artifacts in your list.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another card that makes it reprinted just recently in Modern Horizons 3 is Cephalid Coliseum. This is a wonderful card for, well, what was once a Nadu, a Nadu format. Cephalid Coliseum says you can tap, add a blue mana, it deals 1 damage to you, and then it has Threshold, which means you have to have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Pay a blue, tap, sacrifice it. Target player draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards. So it can...
it ruins a Thoracle attempt, which is great.
And same can be said about Gaia Reach Sanitarium. It also has the ability to ruin a Thoracle attempt, but Cephalid Coliseum has the upside of filtering cards as well and loading the grave.
Yep. Also, I will say that Cephalid Coliseum provides colored mana versus colorless.
Yes. Yeah. And now that Nadu's gone, this is no longer part of a loop that would be able to cycle your library. Next on our B tier, I think we run into Emergence Zone. This is a card that's only seen 1 printing in War of the Spark, so the value is still climbing. Tap, add a colorless. You can pay 1, tap it, sacrifice Emergence Zone. You may cast spells this turn as though they had flash.
So, I mean, it gets around timing restrictions. I think this card has seen a drop since the printing of Born Upon a Wind.
Yep.
Which does the same thing. Most of the time I'm seeing lists play one or the other, and for the most part, it's Born Upon the Wind gets played. If you're not in blue and you want to get around timing restrictions and win in somebody's end step, or with a Necropotence situation, then you would play this card.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. There's a huge upside with Necropotence, and then there's the downside here is this shows you more than anything how valuable colors are. So the reason that it's not being played over things like Born Upon a Wind is because Born Upon a Wind, while it is a spell you have to cast and put yourself out there for, could be countered. You oftentimes need colors in order to be able to make multiple plays in a single turn. Every deck wants to be able to keep rolling through cards to generate advantage, because combo piece leads to combo piece leads to combo piece, and you need specific colors to be able to do that. If you top deck an Emergence Zone when you're in need of another black mana to be able to hit your ad nauseum, let's say, or whatever, it's a feel bad moment, and it slows you down and puts you back a turn. So you can only include, I think if you're looking at commander decks and brawl decks or whatever, you can only really include maybe 4 colorless sources, and that might even be high. But
I mean, I think the number is 1 to 3. Probably,
yeah,
if we're talking
Ancient Tomb,
cEDH.
Yeah, Ancient Tomb,
and one of
takes
those
up one
probably
of those.
be Ancient Tomb.
Yeah. So this is where Emergence Zone falters. It doesn't in low color, 1 or 2 color decks. This probably sees play more than more than you would see it in 3 or 3+. But yeah, that's why it meets our B tier requirement. Let's see the other 2 cards in our B tier. We have Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Now, this is a card that for a long time was seen as, well, it is still very valuable. The ability is that it's a legendary land that turns each land on the battlefield, everybody's lands, into swamps in addition to their other types. So now this, you would think, wow, that's great for me. I'm playing Cabal Coffers, I'm playing Urborg, I'm going to tap for a ton of mana. This also turns your opponent's lands into black sources that if they didn't have the black source necessary to cast,
it color fixes for your opponents.
Exactly, which is the massive,
with no downside.
Yes, the massive downside. So it really sucks. It also has it's that same with Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, I think is what it's called. Yeah.
Yep.
But it turns all of your opponent's land, or turns all of your lands and all of your opponent's lands into forests. So probably worse, for you. There's no land out there that combos with Yavimaya that says, tap it and you get mana equal to the number of forests you control. Cabal Coffers and Urborg is a classic commander combo where Yavimaya just sort of sits alone. So it's a little bit worse, but still makes our B tier cut just for...
Yeah, I mean, this is free color fixing for you.
Yes.
With no downside for you, but free upside as well for your opponent.
Yeah. So there's no reason, if you're in mono green, there's no reason to play this, like, at all. So... and that's where it like sort of like it seems like, oh yeah, I'd play this in my mono green deck, or maybe my 2-color deck. But and then you start thinking about it and you go, well, it hits my 3 colors. Why would I play this? So it is pretty much a 2-color pretty much a 2-color exclusive.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, in mono green, there's some fringe cases where you care about like how many of your lands are forests.
Sure.
So if you're not playing basic forest and whatnot, and you want to turn all your lands into forest for some sort of Nissa related combo, probably, right?
Or like Ashaya, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then next, maybe these fall into C tier, just because it gives your opponents potential upside as well. But as we go through our C tier rankings, I'm just going to list these off. We have Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Academy Ruins, Dryad Arbor, Mystic Sanctuary, Igonjo, Seed the Empire, Takanumba, I don't know the rest of the name, Blast Zone, Abandoned Mire, thank you, Blast Zone, Malakir Rebirth as a potential like protector.
I mean, a lot of the stuff
thing.
in C tier is like, hey, these are auto includes in very specific strategies,
and they have upside. Yeah.
Yep.
Den of the Bugbear, which you have infinite mana, you can feed into it and win the game. Plaza of Heroes, and then cards like Dakmor Salvage, where they just like Dakmor Salvage is more or less a special shout out. It really only fits into one deck.
You want Dakmor Salvage.
Yeah, and Gitrog gets.
If you're recurring stuff, you want Malakir Rebirth. If you care about enchantments, Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Like if you care about artifacts, Academy Ruins. Like it just really comes down to like, if you need the specific thing that this land is doing, it's an auto include. But the upside isn't high enough to just play it in general.
Yes. Yeah. And like there's cards that I particularly like, like this is a Menace recommendation, but I like the layer lands quite a bit. Like Writhes Grove in all of my Nayagai Gondu shells. It enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer land you control to its owner's hand, and then so it comes in untapped and it taps for one of the 3 colors. So the benefit of this is that there are 2 S tier, or there's at least 1 S tier card in this color, which is Boseiju, where if you're stuck and you need to play Boseiju as a land, you can play the Writhes Grove, get a piece of removal back to your hand, and this comes in untapped, so you can keep moving forward through your game plan. Plus, it's sort of a Lotus Petal in a way. It takes your land drop for the turn, but when it enters, a trigger goes on the stack to sacrifice it unless you return a land. So it comes in, you don't want to return anything. You just tap it, sacrifice it, send it to the grave. So
other stuff I would put into C tier are like the cycle from Modern Horizons, like Waterlogged Grove and Silent Clearing, where if you're in 2 colors and you have those slots available in your mana base, it's pretty much no downside with the upside of card draw.
Yep. Yeah, you take a little bit of life with like to be able to tap for mana, but yeah, if you're in 2 colors, this is card draw that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So these are they again, upside is really what you're looking for, and information is what it provides by giving you another card, and it might just be the next card that wins you the game or it gets you out of a sticky situation. So these cards definitely have purpose. I really like Hall of Heliod's Generosity, like especially moving forward. Now that Dockside's out of the format, we can Hall of Heliod's Generosity is instant speed, and it you can activate it in your upkeep to put a card on top of your library and then pick that card up. So if food chain decks are going to see a massive like step forward, probably be a more popular strategy now that, like infinite mana loops are, less common with Dockside.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's a great card. It's just really the question is like how important are enchantments in your deck?
Yeah.
Like most lists that we look at, play Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study,
Yeah.
and maybe two others. And then the secondary question is how likely is it to be that that enchantment is going to be in your graveyard and that you need to get it back for a secondary attempt? And then the third thing is that it only provides colorless mana.
Yes, and requires colored mana to activate. So
Yes.
it's one of those things where you're gambling on how deep does the game go? Like how long into turns does this game go? Because like you said, is it worth a second approach? Like, are you going to have the time for that? And oftentimes I think we'd say in cEDH, no, you're not going to have the time for that. Or if you do
I do think I think it's all upside, but it's just like your slots are probably already filled unless this card fixes a specific problem in your deck building.
Yeah, and it telegraphs a lot. It gives a lot of information to your opponents. So that's where the downside comes in, is you have to target a specific enchantment. It goes on top of your library for everyone to see, and then they know you're picking that up. They know that it's in your hand, and
they know that you're going to breach this turn.
Yes, exactly. So while it is valuable, one of the strongest things that I think, I can go on record and saying one of the strongest things that you can do in Commander is play a card twice. This offers you that opportunity. So that's the upside here. Flash, any additional shout outs that you wanted to give for this beginner's guide to lands?
We'll just call this D tier stuff where like if it might fill a need.
Right.
Glasspool Mimic. Copying stuff is good. It's copying stuff on a land. Maybe if you're in mono blue, maybe in two colors, consider it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, copies are becoming more and more valuable. I think we see that with like Mockingbird now, like taking a step forward.
Thespian stage, copying a land can be good.
Oh my God. I can't wait to see Dark Depths make a return.
Yeah, I possibly too slow, because then you also need a haste enabler and you're only taking out one opponent, or you need to copy it or myriad or something. But but Thespian Sage by itself, I think it might be worthwhile in some decks to copy a land, not even if it's not Dark Depths.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing about Thespian Stage is you can't target your Gaia's Cradle, you can't target your Sarah Sanctum, because those are legendary lands, and so you run into the problem of having to sacrifice one.
Maze's End, there's gates.
I've seen it work.
Lots of gates out there if you want to make it happen.
And there's spells that literally put 10 lands of your choice or 9 lands of your choice onto the battlefield. So like Maze's End, I've seen it work. I promise you it works.
Rogue's Passage. If there is something in your deck that requires connecting during combat.
There are a few more effects like this now out there in the game too. Like there's one that says target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. And so for 2 mana, so I think it's pay 2, tap, and then 2 or less can't be blocked. So there's nuance to this land type that allows for, depending on your strategy, pretty great. But I've won games with this.
And then one last one for me, and I think is the best of the rest, is Homeward Path.
Oh yes, this should probably
even be C tier.
Yeah, this might. I think this is fringe B C tier. Like this could definitely make it into B tier. But I can't believe we forgot to mention this one. Thank you for bringing it up.
I mean, it's just like how worried are you about being draked, and how important is it that you control your commander on the battlefield, essentially?
Yes. Yeah. And now that we have 2 Drake effects with Volatile Storm Drake and Gilded Drake, like it is kind of like a problem like that you have to look out for, and can definitely like those cards can definitely help tempo out the game, you know, by taking pieces away from a player. And Homeward Path just denies that. So, you know, two of the stronger cards in the format. So, yes, Homeward Path, and I would say a really fun card that I play in my Xeris deck is Kessig Wolfrun, just to punch through and get more cards. But this can also be a game ender with infinite mana, so you have, like, there is that potential. So, all right. Now with the arrival of Duskmourn, I think if this is a segment that y'all would really like, I do have...
Oh, hey, when did we forgot to actually talk about Shifting Woodlands, which I think is a
tier
card?
A tier,
yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Flash. Coming back. Shifting Woodland. So this is one of the best new lands from Modern Horizons 3. This goes into anything with green now. You know, like, this is a A-tier land. It enters tapped unless you control a forest. Thank goodness you're running duels and fetches, because you're probably going to have one. And then it has pay 2 and 2 green. Shifting Woodland becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. Activate only if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Now, if we talk about like how hard it is to hit Delirium, it's pretty easy. Like, you can go, you know, like, you fetch, there's 1. You play Urza Saga, that has 2 typings. You know, like, they're artifact creatures, enchantment creatures, you know, instant sorcery. So you have to play 1 instant or sorcery, a land, and a creature and an artifact. I'm going to have all of those in my starting hand, probably. You know, so Shifting Woodland is easier to hit. The Delirium is easier to hit than you might imagine. And the upside here is that, just like we were talking about Hall of Heliod's Generosity, where like there are certain enchantments that have greater value, like Underworld Breach and even Food Chain, this just becomes that. You know, like, this gives you a second shot without telegraphing, or, you know, really, like...
You know, I just had an original thought, which is that one of the best things you can do in Commander is playing the same card twice.
Dude, that has to be one of the strongest things you can do. How'd you come up with that?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you're listening to the MoxStars podcast,
where there's only A tier, S tier takes. And we drink Dr. Pepper. So clearly we're on the limitless pill diet. So big brain moves here, the MoxStars podcast, Shifting Woodland. I can't believe we almost forgot it. Thank you so much for bringing it back around. This is a huge upgrade to all green decks moving forward in Commander and in cEDH. And I'm not sure if Modern really plays this. I'd be interested to see. But over time, time will tell. All right, the final segment I was hoping to talk about is, now that we have this ticker tape going at the bottom, there are a lot of new cards on it. And there's a lot of cards that are changing in value due to the new ban list. But there are a few cards from Duskmourn that I think are low enough to consider buying. Like, I think that's, even though we say it's not an investment, if you want to play these cards, you want to play in certain formats like Pioneer, Standard, or whatever, you need to have real cards. In cEDH, Commander, real cards don't fucking matter. They just don't. So what I was going to say is, from Duskmourn, there are a few cards that are accessible right now. And for me, I think Enduring Vitality is one of them. That if you're looking to pick up a few cards while they're low, I think Enduring Vitality for 1, a green and a green enchantment creature. It's an Elk Glimmer. It has the ability of Cryptolith Rite. Creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it's a 3/3 with Vigilance. When it dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield as an enchantment, not a creature. So it has, you know, the ability, it has staying power, and it also combos off with Storm Splitter. So Pioneer and Standard decks are going to be seeing a pretty big uptick in rule presence now that Enduring Vitality helps just push the limit on what Storm Splitter is capable of. The next card I want to talk about is a card called Nowhere to Run. It's a 1 and a black flash enchantment that says when Nowhere to Run enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3 until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control can be the targets of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. Ward abilities of those triggers don't, or of those creatures don't trigger. This is the first ability we've seen of this type where it says ward abilities don't trigger. I think this is going to, not only is it removal, but it has staying power in it being a stacks piece for, like allowing your opponent's creatures to be targeted. This upholds your ward. You can still have ward, but your opponent's creatures, even if your opponents are targeting other opponent's creatures, those creatures their ward abilities don't trigger. So I think this has, in the right shell, cEDH potential. We'll see how popular and how much more ward comes into play. And then the last card that I want to talk about is another uncommon that is very accessible right now. It is called Sheltered by Ghosts. It's a 1 and a white card that I just put into the Elevir list. It's enchant creature you control. When Sheltered by Ghosts enters, exile target non-land permanent in opponent controls until Sheltered by Ghosts leaves the battlefield. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has lifelink and ward 2. That has a lot of text. It's a really good card. And in Elevir, you're basically able to enchant Elevir so that Elevir can start drawing cards. So huge piece of removal. While it does turn that creature into a lightning bolt, depending on what you removed, your opponents might be incentivized to protect it as well. So it has cEDH potential in the right shell. I think Elevir definitely it makes the cut. But another card, again, very accessible. Those are my top 3 cards to pursue from Duskmourn at the moment. Flash, anything else before we get out of here?
No. Oh, we have tokens. We didn't mention the tokens.
We have tokens. They're awesome. You can check them out. They're on screen right now. And you can also support the show by finding us on YouTube, where we're trying to hit 400 subscribers before the end of MagicCon, which would be October 28th. So let's keep pushing, keep growing. Pepperheads unite! You can also support us by giving us a 5-star review on all major podcasting platforms. You can support us directly by finding us on Patreon. Become an official Pepperhead for $3 a month. Become an official Pepperhead, get a free entry into each of our bi-weekly giveaways, and then you can also become a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead, like Will Rule, K Mr. K, UWP Quirts, D-Mun82, Tommy Cypher, Jacob Hibbard, The Boogie Ghost, Pool Boy Barry, Draw for Turn. Get 2 free entries into each of our bi-weekly giveaways. And then we have currently hanging out in the MoxStars Dr. Pepper Lounge, we have Revenlift, who is our Cherry Pepper Vanilla Head. And we'll be receiving a hat very soon. I just put in the order today. So we have some more MoxStars merch on the way. And they look rad. I'm going to tell you when I saw the final mock-up, these hats, ooh, they're crispy. All right. This has been the MoxStars Podcast, the #1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. I hope this episode has been worthwhile to all players, not just beginners. And I hope this tier ranking system made a lot of sense if you are uncertain about certain things. And it can be helpful for you in your deck building processes moving forward. All right, Flash, I'm out of here. Bye.
Bye.
Aha! You guys thought I forgot. We're doing this week's giveaway at the end of the show. So thank you for sticking around to the end to see who wins this proxied Elevir cEDH deck built by Menace himself. And we even have our newest Pepperhead in the room. Greg, you're up on the board. Let's go ahead and shuffle it up 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And let's go ahead and spin that wheel to see who wins. Oh, yeah. Who's it going to be? 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 It's Ravenlift! Ravenlift! Congratulations, my dude. You have won yourself an Elevir, a Proxied Elevir cEDH deck. I will be in touch soon to get this thing into your hands. Thank you all for participating. It means so much, for you to support the show, for us to come this far. Thank you all for the support every step of the way. And if you've made it here to the end of the show and you aren't subscribed to the show, what are you doing? Get out there, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform of your choice. You can also support us directly via Patreon to get a chance at any of these decks or any of these giveaways. As you know, only patrons get access to these giveaways, so be sure to sign up if you haven't already. Thank you so much. Until next time, on the next episode of the MoxStars podcast, the #1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. Peace!